All right, today we're jumping into the worldview of Islamic scholar Dr. Israr Emmett. Now, in his view, world history isn't just a series of random events. Instead, he sees it as one single, continuous conflict, a cosmic war that starts in the unseen world but plays out right here, on the grand stage of human history. So let's unpack how this incredible narrative is put together.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll trace this story through 5 key stages. It starts with a primordial act of rebellion, then moves to identifying an earthly agent, then a reinterpretation of major historical events, its role in modern geopolitics, and then finally, to a prophesied endgame.
So, where does a story like this even begin? Well, according to the source material, it all starts way before human history, with the foundational story of creation, obedience, and one incredible act of rebellion.
Okay, to really get this, you first have to understand the main players. The source makes a super important distinction between 2 types of beings. You've got angels, made from light, who literally cannot disobey God's commands. And then you have the jinn, made from smokeless fire, who, and this is the key part, have free will, just like us humans.
And right here, this is the moment everything changes. Iblis, who you might also know as Azazel from some traditions, was a jinn. But he was so devout, so knowledgeable, that he was actually elevated to hang out with the angels. But then, when God created Adam and commanded everyone to prostrate, Iblis used his free will, and he refused.
So the big question is, why? Why did he refuse? The source says it boils down to 2, let's call them spiritual diseases. First, pride, the arrogant belief that I am better than him. I'm made of fire, he's just made of clay. And second, envy, this deep burning resentment for the honor God had just given to this new creation, humanity.
So after being cursed for this rebellion, Iblis makes a request and then a vow. First, he asks God to let him live until the day of judgment. And once that's granted, he basically declares war. He vows that he will relentlessly attack and mislead humanity from every possible angle, promising God, "You will find most of them ungrateful." And boom, the stage is set for an eternal conflict.
Okay, so you've got this cosmic struggle, this unseen war. But how does that actually play out here, on Earth? Well, the narrative says Iblis doesn't just work on one person at a time. No, according to this source, he recruited a collective agent, an entire group, to wage his war on a massive, historical scale.
Now, this right here is the absolute core of the thesis, and it's by far the most controversial claim in the source material. It states, point blank, that one group, the Jewish people, collectively became the earthly agents of Iblis.
And why this group specifically? The source gives 3 main reasons. First, a theological belief that they're God's chosen people, which is interpreted here as believing they're the only true humans. Second, an alleged view that all non-Jews are basically like animals that can be exploited. And third, that they carry the exact same spiritual diseases that caused Iblis's fall in the first place, pride and envy.
All right, so now that the source has identified the key players, the eternal enemy and his earthly agent, it starts to reinterpret huge moments in history as just different battles in this one long cosmic war.
Okay, let's walk through this timeline because it's pretty wild. The narrative says the rejection of Jesus was a major turning point and that it brought on divine wrath, which showed up in 70 AD when the Romans destroyed the Second Temple and kicked off the long exile. Fast forward a few centuries to the First Muslim Civil War, or the Fitna. The source points to a guy named Abdullah ibn Sabah, described as a Jew who pretended to convert to Islam, as the one who stirred up all the trouble. Then, in the 16th century, the source claims Jewish thinkers in Spain masterminded the Protestant Reformation to weaken the Pope and split Christianity. All of this, in this view, leads up to 1917 and the Balfour Declaration, seen as a massive strategic win to finally return to Palestine.
And that brings us right into the modern era. The source presents the 20th and 21st centuries as the critical stage where this long-term plan starts moving at lightning speed. So, once the State of Israel is established in 1948, who or what does this worldview identify as the main obstacle to their ultimate goals? The answer might not be who you'd expect.
The source uses this quote, which it attributes to Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. The logic here is that sure, Arab nations might be a problem, but they're a manageable one. The real ideological and military danger, the true threat, comes from Pakistan, the only Muslim-majority country with nuclear weapons. In this framework, Pakistan is called the antidote that was created before the disease.
Okay, following that same line of reasoning, we get to one of the biggest events in modern history.
Who does the source claim was really behind the September 11th attacks?
According to Dr. Ahmed's analysis, the attacks weren't random at all. They were a strategic masterstroke with 3 clear goals. First, give the U.S. the perfect excuse to invade Afghanistan. Second, create a geopolitical crisis to trap and neutralize their main threat, Pakistan. And third, give Israel all the political cover it needed to crack down on the Palestinians while the rest of the world was looking the other way.
And this brings us to the final, blunt conclusion from the source. It claims, directly and without any ambiguity, that 9/11 was the work of Israel. The argument is that only its intelligence agencies were sophisticated enough and had enough access inside the U.S. system to pull off something that complex.
And this all leads to the final chapter in this worldview, the endgame. After neutralizing all the outside threats and consolidating power, what's the final move on the chessboard that, according to the source, will trigger the ultimate prophesied showdown?
The narrative lays out a clear 3-step plan. Step 1, the complete removal of the Palestinian population, what's called ethnic cleansing, to get rid of any internal resistance. Step 2, demolish the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. And the final step, Step 3, build the third temple right on top of those ruins, which is seen as an act of immense religious importance.
The source claims that finishing these 3 steps will kick off a final apocalyptic battle. In Islamic tradition, it's known as al-Malhama al-Uzma, or the Great War. And Dr. Ahmed directly connects this to the Christian prophecy of Armageddon, that final epic battle between good and evil.
So, there you have it. We've just walked through a complete, self-contained worldview that connects a rebellion in the heavens to modern-day headlines and future prophecies. Now, whether you accept or reject any of this, the question it really leaves us with is this. What does understanding a perspective like this, a view held by many people, tell us about how faith, history, and prophecy can come together to shape how we see our world and the conflicts raging within it?